Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Stakes. We are here today to talk about the SEC's conference slate for the 2022-23 basketball season. Blake, this came out, I guess, yesterday as we do this on a Thursday. What stands out to you as you survey the schedule?
Well, 126 games. I'm ready to pick all 126 here. Let's just go through game by game. We're gonna pick everyone. No, I'm just kidding. We will do that eventually, though. If you're new to the channel, which we have a lot of new people that haven't ever probably seen our basketball coverage yet. But yes, this is always fun to look at the conference slate. Begins December 28th. Um, I think a nice opening night slate. You got Kentucky at Missouri. Dennis Gates' first game, and I don't know if anyone knows this, but I'm pretty high on Dennis Gates, and I think he's done a pretty good job in the offseason at Missouri. So that's a hello, welcome to the SEC type opening night there in SEC play for Missouri hosting Kentucky. Florida at Auburn should be really good. Um, you know, I think I'm pretty high on both of those teams, to say the least. We'll get into our power rankings here, and probably in the next several weeks or so, we'll look at our early power rankings for basketball. Arkansas LSU, that's a fun one, because I think LSU with a new roster is going to be maybe better than some people think. And I've said before, I think Arkansas is easily one of the top teams in the league. Tennessee and Ole Miss. Tennessee, another team with high expectations. So that's a fun one. Alabama, Mississippi State. Chris Jans starting his new era at home against a revamped Alabama team. So a fun opening night. That's kind of something that stands out there right off the bat. But I think when you start looking at the schedule, you're always going to look at the teams you play twice. And I think if you're any SEC fan base, all right, who are the teams we have to play twice? Some teams are in better situations than others with that in terms of the strength of the opponent. But that's the first thing I think you always circle on this. You look at kind of the road home split. What's it like in terms of, oh boy, we get these two teams on the road and back to back, and they're probably top 15 teams. And so I think those are the things you kind of look at. Plus, as always, you have the SEC Big 12 Challenge slotted in there. That's January 28th. A lot of fun matchups in that. Of course, we'll talk more about those as we get closer to the season. But yeah, it's just, I think it's excitement just because that means when the schedule is released, you're getting closer and closer. We're the first week of September basically here. Teams are going to be full on practicing soon enough. Games will be played in pretty much 2 months from now. So yeah, we're getting there.
Okay, you talked about the double matchups, and we've not done our predictions yet. But I mean, right now you're seeing the top 6 teams in the league on what forecasts have come out nationally right now. Would it be fair to say that is, in no particular order, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, A&M is probably your top 6?
I think that's, from what I'm seeing, yes. I think that there are a couple of other teams like Florida that I think I would put in that conversation. But based on what a lot of people are looking at thus far, I wouldn't be surprised if in some order that is your top 6. But yeah, that's a good starting point, I think, for the discussion.
Well, I looked up all those teams, and it's the double opponents is where the schedule really starts to separate. And interestingly enough, as best I can tell, well, in terms of the permanent rivalries, you've got Arkansas and Auburn, or excuse me, Alabama and Auburn always play each other. Tennessee and Kentucky always play each other. Arkansas and A&M always play each other. So there's 2 other games that are home and home for each team. So if somebody gets an uneven draw there, that gets skewed. I'll tell you the team that really got a tough draw. I don't know if, and I haven't surveyed every team, but Vanderbilt's double opponents are Kentucky, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and South Carolina. Poor Jerry Stackhouse trying to rebuild a program, and you get that. Now, of course, Kentucky, Florida, Tennessee are permanent opponents, which is really making it tough to rebuild a program. But if you just want a first glance of who got the toughest slate, it's going to be hard to beat Vandy.
As I say, we're giving you guys just our kind of initial reactions here. We'll obviously dive deeper into all these individual schedules, but that is one that stands out, like you mentioned, because of the double, and plus the other teams you're going to add to it. So Yeah, it's not a perfect scenario. I think kind of looking at some of the stretches too for Vandy. They play. I'm trying to look at kind of how it kind of sets up in some of these matchups. I think they get what is it? They've got a stretch in. I want to say it's January where I think it's January 10th. They're at Tennessee. 14th, they're at home against Arkansas. 17th, they're home against Alabama.
Yeah.
And then it's 21st, you go to Georgia. But then after that, you got Kentucky. So yeah, and then you got to go to A&M. So
And then
and
Alabama and
then Alabama,
Tuscaloosa.
yeah. So that's
Uh,
a tough
whew.
stretch. Yeah, without question. But you know what? We're going to say that about a lot of SEC teams because once again, I think you're looking at a league that I think this year the league's going to be a little bit different because you do have so many new coaches, and we haven't been in that point, in recent years where you have this many new coaches coming into the league and this many kind of new looking rosters too. Especially with LSU, where it's basically almost a completely
All
different
new.
roster. So I think that's some of the things too that you look at, and it's going to be. I think this year is going to be a little bit different for SEC basketball because I think it's going to be a matter of seeing these new coaches, like we said, Dennis Gates, Matt McMahon, Todd Golden, and so forth. Um, how quickly can they put everything together and get their teams, playing for one of those top spots that we talk about. And I think that's going to be certainly one of the most fascinating storylines. But again, that's where scheduling matters. Looking at, for example, like a team like Florida, right? Um, I'm just kind of looking at some of their schedule here. Like there's a spot in late January where they play Tennessee at home, then they go to Kentucky, and then right after that they go to Alabama. So like
Ooh.
that's a big 3-game stretch for a team like Florida. So there are a lot of those throughout the schedule. And again, everybody, I'm sure if you're a fan of a specific team, you've already looked at those spots in the schedule. But those are the kind of things I think you have to look at this season because it is a year where I think there's a lot of unknowns with some of the teams that have new coaches. But I think you're still looking at a league that's going to have the potential for 6 preseason top 25 teams. And again, like I said, I think there's possibly a seventh or eighth that's not that far off in terms of where they're at to start the season. So that is something where long term outlook when you're looking at the schedule, we don't know where any of these teams are going to be come December 28th, but you can at least take a pretty good guess that there's going to be a lot of strong ones throughout the league. So
Okay, Blake, there's one pretty significant storyline we've not touched on. And you know what? I'm going to give you a second to see if you can guess it. Well, we bring you a quick word from our sponsor, Steaks. We've got some big games coming up in football this week. To add a little extra excitement to it, we at Southeastern 14 went ahead and made some predictions in the Stakes app. We've made about 30 on football for this weekend alone. We want to hear from you guys. And by the way, we will do this in basketball season too, which will be interesting. We want to hear if you guys agree or disagree with our takes. So go to playwithstakes.com forward slash 14. That's playwithstakes, STAKES.com /14. Sign up for stakes, place your predictions on our questions. If you use the invite code Southeastern14, no spaces there, when you sign up, you get a double welcome bonus. Okay, Blake, can you guess the storyline we have not discussed?
no, I've tried. I don't have it for you.
Well, I'll give you a big hint. One coach was at one SEC school last year and is at another this year.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's Mike White, but I don't know the storyline that's involved, I suppose.
Well, Georgia goes to Florida on January the 7th as he
Ah,
faces his
I was
old
looking for that
team,
game. There it
and
is. Yeah.
then a return trip on the 28th of February. So Mike White, and again, this is not a surprise because Georgia and Florida, I believe, are permanent basketball opponents. But Mike White will face his own team. And Georgia, I think you think has got a chance to be sneakily better. Cario Aquino in one of the upsets of SEC basketball actually came back to Georgia. He could have played probably anywhere. So good job by Mike White to get him back in the fold. But Georgia, Florida could be an interesting one.
Quite a start to the SEC slate for Georgia. Home against Auburn, at Florida. Tough two-game stretch there to start things off. But yeah, that's a big one. Of course, just kind of seeing how, you know, I think the response to Mike White should be good from Florida fans. I don't
Yeah.
think you should hold any grudge against Mike White. So I know not everyone's going to agree with that, but yeah, well, that will be a fun matchup just from that standpoint. So yeah, I mean, it's again, we'll obviously go through these as we do every year. We'll pick every game throughout the season, just like we do in football. But I'm excited. It's almost like it's not that far away at this point. Like we're gonna be diving into a lot more basketball preview stuff here in the coming weeks, and so everybody's been waiting on that. I know there are a lot of fans who jumped on board with us during basketball season. Yeah, we've had a lot of football stuff, of course, but basketball coverage not that far away now. Probably less than a few weeks, really, when we start kind of jumping into these teams, looking at kind of breaking them down and doing all that. So yeah.
And then you have the 28th is SEC Big 12 Challenge Weekend. The teams that are not playing in that, South Carolina going to Georgia and Vanderbilt traveling to Texas A&M that weekend.
Yeah, still in that rotation where I think it's what a 2-year rotation. Usually, the teams that get left out will rotate out for a couple, and then it flips. So I think after
How
this
did,
year, you
how
have
did A&M
a
not
recent
get
rotation
in that? I'm confused.
because it's a rotation based on I think it's like a 2-year rotation. So even if
Okay.
you something I don't remember how they do it. I don't know if it's by league standings or something, but I think it stays intact for a couple seasons. So even if last year you made a jump, it's a I think it's a couple year thing. Now I may be wrong about that, but I feel like at some point I saw that somewhere mentioned when I was asking about it. So yeah, I think it's a rotation based thing. So
That's right. It is the team that you get 1 year at home, you go to on the road the next year, right?
well, and I think the SEC big whatever Big 12. I think it's the way they do those. Is people are always asking like, well, we finished. Like, I think it was Auburn, right? Not long ago, Auburn was left out of it.
Yeah.
Auburn had finished first or second the year before or something. I don't no one quote me on this because I'm just talking off the top of my head here, but something like that. And so I think it's just because it doesn't change every year, if that makes sense. Like it's every 2 years, I'm pretty sure, in terms of the teams that will be slotted in those spots. So again, that's where had Vanderbilt finished first in the SEC last year, right? They would still not be in there because it's
Right.
based on the rotation from the previous season.
Yeah.
So
Like you're seeing rematches. Texas goes to Tennessee again. Kansas this time goes to
right,
Kentucky.
it's there's stuff like that it's yeah, it's all based on the picking of the SEC teams is based on the standings from the previous 2-year period. If that makes sense, like it's trust me, I'm not spelling this out perfectly, but yeah, that's why. So if people are wondering why how they're picked, that has something to do with it. So
Any parting thoughts on the SEC basketball schedule?
nope. We will have a lot more stuff to come. And yeah, we're excited because I think, again, it's going to be another big year for the league. And hey, we know at least 126 games we have to predict this season. And we know that at least half the fan bases in those games not going to be happy with us. So,
All right. Well, visit our partners at Stakes and their app. Really cool. Doesn't cost you anything to join, doesn't cost you anything to bet. It's all for a lot of fun, and you can win some NFTs. And if you're interested in advertising with us, email me at chris.lee@southeastern14.com. We barely had a YouTube channel a year ago, and we're growing quickly. So anyway, thanks to all of you who've watched. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. Help yourself not miss any of our content. For Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.